Thanks to another huge moment by Francisco Lindor, the New York Mets are heading to the NLCS.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. What a game. The New York Mets, who were down and out at the end of May, have been the best team in baseball since June, and they have now proven that they were the best team in the National League East this year, and they'll have a chance against one of these NLCS powerhouses, whether it's the Padres or the Dodgers, to prove that they were the best team in the National League this season. What an unbelievable run. We will talk about the game, but man, oh man, we'll just throw some comments up. Lindor, love this team. LFGM, let's go. What an unbelievable season and an unbelievable game. There's one moment to talk about before anything else, and that is the grand slam by Francisco Lindor, because the New York Mets early in this game, it was looking like the type of game where the Phillies could have got back into this series, because Ranger Suarez was not sharp. The Mets had multiple bases loaded opportunities where they just were expanding the zone, not being themselves. And it's understandable. You're trying to make something happen. You're being aggressive. You see the writing on the wall. You want to get the job done. You don't want to go back and face Zach Wheeler at Citizens Bank Park. And the Phillies really kept Wheeler in the back pocket. They said they were going to go with Ranger Suarez in the bullpen to try to get the job done, and they would have had an advantage in that Game 5. So you're staring up against that. Very similar to, I think, 1986, before my time, where they didn't want to face, what was it, Dick Scott with the scuffed baseball, so they had to win Game 6. Kind of a similar vibe, right? You had to win this game, and there was so many chances early where the Mets just could not get that big hit with runners in scoring position. José Quintana was brilliant. The Mets just hung in there, and then finally you get the right guy up. And the right guy is Francisco Lindor. This season, I love this comment. We'll throw this one up. Lindor haters are real quiet. That's absolutely right, because it's Mike Scott, by the way. Someone corrected me. Mike Scott. Showing my age here. Francisco Lindor, this is his season where he has cemented himself as one of the best players in franchise history and shown why the Mets gave him $341 million. He has been unbelievable. You go back to where this all started, the players only meeting, and I've talked about it so many times on the show, but it's worth repeating now as the Mets have done this incredible thing to get to the NLCS on Lindor's huge home run. Again, he sets up that meeting. They talk about accountability. He stands in front of the media for 13 minutes, answers every question, showing that he is adept at now being a leader in New York City. And he goes out the next day. The lineup wasn't good the next day. Francisco Lindor goes 4 for 4, puts the first run on the board with the home run. It just does everything. I believe he scored the winning run in that game. And time again, Francisco Lindor comes up in the big moment and comes through. Here he was, grand slam. And after an entire game where the Mets just could not get the big hit, they get the biggest hit. And all of a sudden, it goes from a game where it's just every run matters so much, and obviously it still did, but to have some breathing room for the end, it was just exactly what this team needed. And you watch this group celebrating, the tears streaming down Brandon Nimmo's face, tears streaming down Lindor's face, Mendoza, all these guys coming together. You look at these two clubs, and the Phillies, when these two teams met for the London series, the Phillies were the best team in baseball. They were riding the momentum of two deep playoff runs in 2022 and 2023. They were a team that had been together, and they hit the ground running. They were unbelievable to start the season. The Mets, not so much. They meet in that London series. The two teams part ways. The Phillies play basically 500 baseball for 4 months, and the New York Mets are the best team in the game. But because the Phillies had that padded record from early on, everyone believes they're going to win this series. Everyone still thinks that the Phillies are the team to beat. They're the favorites. The Mets are a better team than the Philadelphia Phillies, and they showed that in every single game this series. It took everything breaking the Phillies' way in game 2 to even push this series to 4 games. The Mets deserve this, and they became an amazing team. Like, team is a big part of this. When you see the way these guys are responding to each other, how they're pulling for each other, how you have, Sean Manaea starting, all the pitchers got 59 on their eye black. Not sure if they did it today for Quintana. I didn't catch that, but the way they're celebrating each other, the way they love each other, they have become a unit that pulls on the rope together. And here they are in the NLCS. It's an incredible story. I feel like this has become my favorite Mets season of my lifetime. There's this in 2015 for me, Mets fans of my age. I'm 29 years old, who weren't alive for the 86 run and all those runs in the 80s. This team has just been so special. And to get the performances they got in this clincher, for José Quintana to be so sharp, he was pitching significantly better than Ranger Suarez, but the results were the same. And he just kept on making big pitch after big pitch after big pitch to get you through the bulk of this game. Reed Garrett comes on. What an incredible story Garrett was this year. A guy that the Mets picked up off of waivers last year, didn't even make the opening day roster. Think about how many guys you can say that about that are on this team making huge contributions, from Mark Vientos to Jose Iglesias. And again, Garrett in that spot gets 2 huge strikeouts to get you through that inning. David Peterson comes on, gets the final out of that 6th inning, gets you through the 7th and the 8th. Peterson, an unbelievable story. First-round pick for this franchise, who took some time to materialize into this version of himself. And now here he is. How many big outs has he gotten in this postseason? He was the one that got the save to clinch the wild card round. He got big outs in game 1 and game 4, the crucial games of this series. David Peterson, a central figure. And sure enough, when it comes to the pitching side, it ends with Edwin Díaz. And Edwin Díaz, like any Mets closer should, or not should, but typically does, he made us sweat. He really did. Walks the first 2 batters. I think everybody was screaming at their TV, wondering why the Mets didn't just stick with Peterson, because he was rolling. He was pitching to contact. He was throwing strikes. But ultimately, Edwin Díaz gets a big strikeout to lock himself back in, gets a fly out, and gets to square off against Kyle Schwarber, a guy who he's owned in his career. Up to that point, 0 for 9 with 7 strikeouts. He strikes him out once again, despite the best efforts of the Fox crew, noting their career histories, noting the fact that one big swing from Schwarber would have tied the game. And the Mets get the job done. It's just an unbelievable series that the Mets just played, an unbelievable run. And this team, you're watching them, and you really have to feel like there's a chance that we're watching a World Series team. I mean, they got to win 8 more games. Whoever they face off with is not going to be easy in the NLCS, whether it's the Padres or the Dodgers. And we'll have plenty of time to talk about that. That series is not going to begin until Sunday, which means we all get a couple of days just to embrace what has been such a great season for the Mets. And I want to spend more time on Francisco Lindor in a second here, because what Lindor has done, it's just been the best season that I've ever seen a New York Met have. And David Wright had some good seasons. Carlos Beltran had some good seasons. I'm sure there's Mike Piazza, of course, had some great seasons. But Francisco Lindor has had the best season I have ever seen. It has been an absolute pleasure to be covering it on this show every single day for all of these months now. And I want to continue to shower him with praise, because it's just been a remarkable series of huge moments. And for Lindor to have the huge home run against the Braves to clinch a playoff berth, and now to clinch the NLCS, coming through at that grand slam, it's Hollywood script stuff. So we'll go through Lindor's amazing year. A little bit more in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, the live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And again, you can follow along live. So if you're watching these Mets games, there's something that you like. Let's say the Mets today, they fell behind. Maybe you wanted to grab the money line. And if this was your first bet with FanDuel, again, you place that $5 bet, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, win or lose. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. If you want to head out to the NLCS at Citi Field, or if you're on the West Coast, you want to catch wherever that series is going to begin, make sure you shop for your tickets over at Game Time, the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. You can view your seat before you arrive, so know exactly what to expect. You can click the feature to see all-in pricing, so you're not going to be surprised by fees at checkout. You can buy your tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps. You're all set. Make sure that you download the Game Time app, and you're going to get $20 off your first order. Again, that is $20 off. You use the code LOCKEDONMLB. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, so I want to talk a little bit more about Francisco Lindor because, of course, it's Francisco Lindor that hits that grand slam. He is just the heartbeat of the New York Mets. And I wrote an article for Just Baseball today where I spotlighted all the different future Hall of Famers that are in the playoffs this year and what they have at stake. And obviously, I'm biased. I host Locked On Mets. You see the banners, the flag, everything behind me. You know that this is the team that I root for. This is the team I'm passionate about. And I might be the biggest biased Lindor fan in the media. Regardless, what he's done this year is remarkable. And when you compare the narrative of his season with the other guys who are playing for something this October, I can make the argument nobody has more to play for than Francisco Lindor. You're talking about a guy that made it to the World Series in his second season. He was the best player on the then Cleveland Indians back in 2016. His team goes to Game 7 of the World Series. They lose in extra innings to the Cubs, where the Guardians are just pushing up against history that was inevitable with that Cubs team. And they lose. And Lindor has to go through that experience. And I'm sure he thought at the time, we'll be back. And yes, they made it back to the playoffs. Francisco Lindor in 5 playoff appearances since going to the World Series, he never won a series since until this year. So if you compare where he was nearly a decade ago, 8 years ago, that close. And I'm sure Lindor probably thinks about it sometimes. He was hitting .320 in that World Series through the first 6 games, 0 for 5 in Game 7. You now wait all of this time. You get traded to the Mets. You sign the huge contract that puts incredible expectations on you. You start off your Mets tenure with a brutal beginning to 2021. You learn a lot, but it's a rough year. There's the thumbs down celebration that the Mets did. And obviously he's admitted that was a bad look for him at the time. So you make a bad first impression with some Mets fans. And as I put that comment up before, there's been Lindor haters all the way through until this season because of probably the start. 2022, you lead the team to 101 games and you come up short. You guys don't win the division and you lose in the wild card round. So you have to deal with that. 2023, an incredibly disappointing season where you thought the franchise that you're the face of was on this steady climb up and you crash back down. And all of a sudden you're trading future Hall of Famers in Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander. They were supposed to be able to pitch you to that first championship since 1986. And then this year, your team is 11 games under in May. You have a relief pitcher that's launching his glove into the stands and saying the Mets are the worst team in baseball to the media. And you lock in and you put this team on your back, and obviously other guys have stepped up, but it's Lindor that set the tone. And now he has this team 8 wins away from the World Series, 4 wins away from the World Series, 8 wins away from a championship. It's been the season of Francisco Lindor. And if he can pull this thing off and he can get the Mets to the World Series, when you look back at what is very much a career that is on the track of going to Cooperstown, this is going to be the season that they might write about on that plaque. Francisco Lindor leading the New York Mets to the 2024 World Series. Francisco Lindor taking a team that was out of it, dead in the water, and helping create a culture where they became the best team in baseball. You cannot say enough good things about Francisco Lindor. And on top of it all, you look at each of these incredible victories the Mets have had in October, from getting into the dance at the end of September against the Braves and hitting that clutch 2-run homer, to drawing the walk against Devin Williams, to put Pete Alonso up as the winning run and Alonso comes through, to now when you are down a run, your team has struggled to get the big hit all game. You come up with the bases loaded facing Carlos Estevez, who's throwing 99 to 100 on every pitch. You lock in, you get a pitch you can handle, and you hit it over the wall. This guy is everything for this team. And now he gets a chance to play in the NLCS with the New York Mets and potentially lead the most unbelievable underdog story that this franchise has maybe seen. Obviously, there's the 1969 Mets, but at least of the past 50 years, there's no season that compares to this. Where the Mets were to where they are now, it has just been a collection of remarkable stories. And I want to touch on some of those as well in the next segment. We're not going to even focus too much on the specifics of this game. If you didn't watch it, I'm sorry. You should have. Watch the highlights. Lindor hits the grand slam. Quintana, Garrett, Peterson, Edwin Díaz combined to only give up 1 run. The Mets got great defense in this game for the most part. I mean, yeah, if you want to quibble about a Mark Vientos play that resulted in the 1 run, you can. We're not going to worry about that. We're just going to talk about what this team has accomplished and the guys that you want to appreciate as this team is going to play in the NLCS. We'll talk about some more of those great stories in just a minute. First, though, another quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. Explore those USA cities you've always secretly wanted to learn more about. We're talking about your rival cities. With Booking.com, you'll have a wide variety of choices from hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more. So you might just find your perfect stay, even in your baseball rival city during the postseason. Maybe you want to head out to San Diego or Los Angeles, depending on where this NLCS will begin. You can use Booking.com to get the perfect stay for you, from hotels that look over stadiums to family-friendly resorts, cute bed and breakfasts, and so much more. Booking.com will offer you the right stay, which can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. Booking.com, Booking.yeah. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports when you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. And if you're watching our stream on YouTube right now, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, like the video, do all that good stuff that helps out the channel. And I really do appreciate all of you who have tuned into these streams and just tuned into episodes throughout the entire season. It has been an incredible ride. So speaking of that ride, here the Mets are. They are in the NLCS. We'll have plenty of time to chew on that, to talk about matchups, who's going to make the roster, Jeff McNeil's potential return. There's a lot that we can go through, but to me, I think this season now, especially considering what some of these guys have done in October, has really been a testament to the core that's been here for the last 4 years since Lindor got traded to the Mets, and for a couple of these guys even beyond that. And that core I'm talking about is Francisco Lindor, Brandon Nimmo, and Pete Alonso. They were painted as guys that couldn't win, that couldn't make it to the playoffs and couldn't do anything when they got there. And Pete Alonso in particular has been through the ringer this season. And I've criticized him at times because you know what? If you weren't criticizing Pete Alonso based on the performance that we saw for a majority of this year, you were probably being a little bit too nice to him because Pete Alonso did have struggles. Pete Alonso did look like a guy where the contract year was weighing on him. But now, all of a sudden, he's coming through with big at-bat after big at-bat. He looks like Pete Alonso again. And that home run, which was right there with Lindor's tonight. I mean, now they're just competing, right? I guess Alonso has to hit another one. Lindor starts it off to beat the Braves. Biggest home run the Mets have had in a long time. Pete Alonso one-ups them. Game winner where the Mets are trailing and about to get eliminated. You know, the Mets still had a game to play with when Lindor hit his. Alonso back against the wall, 9th inning, big home run. He's the answer. And then Francisco Lindor does it in this moment to get to the Mets to the NLCS. Those two guys, though, are showing that they can win together and showing that they could be the two big bats in the lineup that can get the job done. And to see Pete Alonso get to enjoy this run with the New York Mets, it's so awesome. I talked about that article I wrote for Just Baseball about guys that are on a Hall of Fame path and what they had to play for. And if you want to make the case that Pete Alonso can get to 500 home runs and one day end up in Cooperstown, there's an argument there and we could spend time on it. But really, Pete Alonso has a much better chance to be an all-time great Met than an all-time great. And these moments that he's had, they might just make all the difference when it comes to free agency, where these two sides just look at each other and say, we love each other too much. Let's get a deal done. And Pete Alonso gets to stay where he wants to, and the Mets get to keep an absolute fan favorite. I've talked about it before. I have so many Pete Alonso shirts, and my nephew, when he swings a bat for the first time and hits the ball hard, he's 4 years old. Pete Alonso's name is what comes out of his mouth. For him, the idea of swinging hard and hitting a baseball, it's a Pete Alonso, because that's what he's known since he was born here. Like, Pete Alonso has been such a huge part of the fabric of the New York Mets. To see him get this moment, it's awesome. And Brandon Nimmo, the other part of this trio, Brandon Nimmo just missed the 2015 Mets. Michael Conforto got drafted out of college and sort of leapfrogged over him and got a chance to be part of that team and had a lot of big moments. Brandon Nimmo didn't enter the picture until 2016, didn't really become a player for the Mets until 2017. And now he's a guy that's going to retire an all-time great Met. He's got the contract, so he's going to be here. He's going to finish top 10 in so many different categories in Mets franchise history. And he's had a lot of big moments this playoff run. And then another guy that I feel like deserves to be in this conversation is someone that has been just counted out for 3 years now. We were talking about Mark Vientos back in 2021 on this show, where I was pumping him up and saying this is a guy that I thought had 40 home run power in the big leagues. But I also was dead wrong because I said into this microphone so many times I never thought he could play third base. And granted, he has made some mistakes, but he's been playable there. And he's made some really nice plays for some of the plays that he hasn't made. And he has just been the Mets' best hitter, really. It's ever since he got the starting job. I mean, by OPS, WRC+, you see what he's done in the playoffs so far. I mean, what was he, like 7 for 8 against left-handed pitchers so far in the postseason, until I think he might have got out in that at-bat. But regardless, he has been so clutch and really has solidified himself as a guy that's going to be part of this core for years to come. And then you get Jose Iglesias and the unbelievable story he's been. Starling Marte, 2022, everyone loves him his first year with the Mets, all-star season, gets hurt, kind of part of the reason why the Mets sort of faded down the stretch. 2023, plays through injuries, has a brutal year. Everyone thinks it's just an albatross of a contract. Can the Mets just eat the deal? Can they trade him? How can they get out of Starling Marte? This year, he had his moments early, but now coming on late, he is everything to this team. He has been such a huge part in this playoff run, getting big hits, having great at-bats, still playing solid defense and right. Tyrone Taylor, somehow grabbing a starting center fielder job at the 11th hour this year. He's been clutch. Jesse Winker, your one trade deadline acquisition with the huge home run in this series, the big triple in the other series, big moment after big moment. Picking up Ryan Stanek. It didn't look good for a while. All of a sudden, Ryan Stanek is the Mets' second best reliever next to Edwin Díaz. And of course, just all these pitchers, Sean Manaea, Luis Severino, what they've done this year. The best tandem of signings that any franchise in baseball had this offseason. you kidding me? You signed those two guys for a combined $27 million, and both of them pitch like frontline guys and give you 180 plus innings and are now pitching huge innings in the postseason. José Quintana, the afterthought of an offseason where the Mets signed Justin Verlander and Kodai Senga. Those two guys really haven't done much this year. Senga, it's been a couple of innings, and they were big in game one. But José Quintana is the guy that posted for 170 plus this year. And in the two clinchers, it's Quintana that has gotten all the big outs and has kept the Mets in these games for them to win it late. And then I think last but not least, when you're just talking about the coaches and the players, it's Carlos Mendoza. Talk about the Buck Showalter effect. Rookie manager comes in, and now he's got a chance to lead this Mets team to the World Series. But Mendoza has just set a winning culture for the New York Mets. You can tell how much his players love playing for him, the way they're embracing him after these clinching games, how much they care about each other. David Stearns identified Carlos Mendoza as the guy he wanted to work with, and you see the benefit of having David Stearns at the helm. I know we did a show after the trade deadline last year where all hope was lost, and I talked about 5 things the Mets had to do to become a contender in 2024, and number one on the list was hire David Stearns, and a couple weeks later, David Stearns gets hired by the New York Mets, and this isn't happening this year if not for David Stearns. If you think about all of the moves that he made, we just talked about so many of them. Signing Iglesias to a minor league contract, being open with their communication of Iglesias when he didn't make the team as to why he didn't make it and how he was going to be the first middle infielder called up. And the honesty when Iglesias asked, what about third base? And said, no, Mark Vientos would probably get the call in that situation. He sticks it out. And I mean, what a different team the Mets would be without him. And it's just been a storybook year for the New York Mets. There's just no other way to describe it. And now for the next couple of days, we get to revel in what this story has been. The Mets, they knock off. I'm going to give the Mets the credit more than the Padres. They knocked off the Braves. They won that do or die game. They beat the Braves. Feels like they knocked off the Braves by beating them. They knocked off a really good Brewers team, David Stearns' former team that had so much talent. So many great pitchers in that bullpen, so much speed and incredible defense they had, and a budding superstar in Jackson Chourio that got all the big hits in that series. The Mets outlast them. And now you have a chance here, and you got to go up against your division rival in the NLDS, a series that we knew was going to be really exciting. And you prove you're the best team in this division all season. And or at least since June, the Mets were the best team in the National League East, and now it'll go down in history. 2024, this was the year of the New York Mets. It wasn't the year of the Phillies. Certainly wasn't the year of the Braves. The Mets are the team. When you start next year, who's atop the mountain of this division? It's the Mets. And obviously those things can change, and those teams are still going to be very good. But the Mets have sent a message, and they beat both of those teams along the way to get to this point where they're now 4 wins away from getting to the World Series for the first time since 2015. And 8 wins away from winning their first World Series since 1986. Hope they get it done, but regardless of where they go from here, I'm just so happy that we still get to be on this journey together. I've talked about it since May 12th. I have done an episode of Locked On Mets every single day, and now we're doing 2 episodes a day, and I honestly love it. When we get to a point where there's going to be nothing left to talk about, I'm not going to know what to do with myself. I'm really not, but for now, the show goes on. We get to keep this thing rolling. Game 1 of the NLCS will start on Sunday. Tonight, you get to watch, see who's going to win between the Dodgers and Padres, if that's going to go to a Game 5. And we all just get to sit back and wait. The New York Mets don't have to go back to Philly. They don't have to see Zach Wheeler again. They come through. They get the job done in front of their home fans for the first time in the history of Citi Field. And what a perfect team to accomplish that feat. How can you not love the 2024 New York Mets? And that's definitely how we got to end the show. I appreciate all of you who have tuned into the live stream. I appreciate all of you who will watch the replay or listen to the replay on your podcast feeds. Thank you all sincerely for tuning into this show every day. I cannot say how much I appreciate the audience that has stuck with me through this entire ride. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We'll be back with another show tomorrow morning. I'll get a little bit more into numbers, to details. I think I'm just going to talk about why the Mets are better than the Phillies. I mean, if there's ever a time to do it, I think it was after this series. So 6 o'clock in the morning on YouTube, you're going to get that show where I will break down why the Mets are so much better than that annoying Phillies team. Until then, that is all for this edition of Locked On Mets.